Right, and now for that all-important conversation on the future of our planet, the future of our country, the future of our children. And it's got everything to do with climate change. Now, tonight we want to focus on renewable energy, specifically how renewable energies intersect with climate change, but also what every one of us wants to grow, to develop. So renewable energy and sustainable development. And with us is somebody who's well versed in this indeed. From the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, or GEAPP, we have the Regional Partnership Manager for Africa. We have Mr. Zeph Kivugi joining us live from the coastal town of Watamu. Good evening, Zeph. How are you doing?
Good evening. I am doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, and I will say the pleasure is ours to have an expert such as yourself on this conversation. I think straight away we should just jump into it. Help us understand, talk to us about what sustainable development should be. I mean, there's a lot of debate on this, there's a lot of different opinions on this, but really, what should sustainable development be?
In my view, sustainable development should be where we are getting the kind of lifestyles we want, getting the things we want to be utilizing in life without jeopardizing the ability for generations after us to get the same. So the same quality of life that we are aspiring for should be possible for the generations to come. Meaning that the resource intensity, so for example, we can use water to produce food, we can use water to do the kind of things that we do with water. But if we are going to use that water and deplete the water resources, if it was for irrigation, you find that now the next generation is not able to irrigate energy and many other sort of resources, then that's not sustainable. So it should be making sense economically, it should make sense socially, should make sense politically and all other sort of aspects, so that we are saying that we are meeting our needs today, and the ones that are coming after us, the next generation and the next generation, should be able to utilize those same resources, so either more efficiently or without necessarily depleting them. That's how I see sustainable development.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Zeph. Now, how can renewable energy get us there, to that ideal that you just described right now?
Yes, so I think there's probably the need for us to define one or two terms here.
Go ahead.
I don't think we need to define energy, but we can kind of touch on what renewable energy really is, and then we'll tie that to sustainable development. So energy would be what we use to get things done. So, you know, we use energy for transport, we use energy for lighting our spaces during the night, we use energy for cooling our spaces or heating our spaces, depending on where we are. And if the kind of resource that we are using to generate that energy for the usage we want, let's stick to electricity for ease of explanation. If the resource that we are using is not easily replenished naturally, then it's not renewable. Renewable would be that which, for example, the sun rises every day. So if you can use a technology like PV, or what people commonly call solar, the sun will rise every day. So it means we can generate new electricity every day, and you will not run out of fuel, so to speak. But if you're using, let's say, what people call fossil fuels, let's say LPG, what we use for cooking, or oil or gas, it means you need to always get a new tank of that fuel to generate electricity. And for it to be created in nature, as they say, it takes millions of years, which means the oil that we have on the planet is largely finite if you compare it to the existence of humans on the planet. What that means is that the more you extract that oil, the more, let's say, an oil field could run out, the more you will need to open up new fields. That means that is not renewable. So renewable energy is solar, it is wind, it is hydro, it is geothermal, and such, which means that for you to have that resource available, you don't need to do much. Nature does its thing. The sun just needs to rise and we have enough solar. We just need to have a bit of rain, which replenishes some aquifers, and then that goes to the earth's crust, and you have geothermal. That also means that the power plant that you will be setting up does not need to be provided with a lot of fuels every other day or every day. That is usually supplied by nature. Wind just blows on its own. So renewable energy in the context of sustainable development becomes a much better option, because it means the resource intensity is not as high, because you don't take away the sun by utilizing it today. It doesn't mean tomorrow the sun will be less. You don't get rid of the wind just because you generate electricity in Lake Turkana, for example. It doesn't mean tomorrow the wind will not blow. So renewable energy is that kind of resource that is always going to get replenished naturally without us having to put in a lot of input. And so that means it's a lot more sustainable, because the next generation will find wind blowing, it will find the oceans there, the rivers will still flow, etc.
Right. Now, I mean, you've done a great job explaining this. Perhaps let's see if you can do an even better job explaining this next point. There are those who feel, and they do criticize renewable energy as to be somewhat unreliable or inefficient. They say, that it's too intermittent. There are too many factors that can stop somebody from really relying on this. What would you say to such people?
Yes, they have a point, and they are right in very many ways. These technologies are new. We have something like oil and gas that is quite mature. So that's a mature technology. We know what to do. Nuclear matured at some point, and then there were some concerns. It's a clean technology, but it's a technology that we have developed over time. So it is true, a lot of the renewable energy resources are variable. The word you're using there, which is intermittency, is variability. When the sun goes off, all solar power plants will go off. The wind tends to blow at night better. And during the day, it's a lot less, so the consistency is less. So a lot of these renewable energy technologies will tend to be intermittent, save for a lot of hydro, which also changes based on the weather and the kind of rainfall patterns. So they have a true point, and that criticism is justified in all senses of the word. But then the fact that once you set it up, you don't have the running costs, it means there's other ways you can work on it to make sure the availability, reliability is improved. So for example, there is what we are now calling the BEST consortium, where you can, which we are trying to work towards establishing a mechanism where this variable electricity can be generated and stored in a battery energy storage system, which is what BESS is, the BESS. And it's really, I would say, a platform of quite a number of partners trying to say a country like Kenya has got quite a bit of renewable energy. We are famed to have one of the greenest grids, but it's also the one country where we are seeing bills going up because the country also chose to go cost-reflective tariff. So that's a major challenge. Why is the bill going up? It is going up because when the wind is blowing, you and I are not necessarily needing that electricity. But in the morning when you wake up and you need a cup of coffee, or you need to take a hot shower, the wind might have stopped blowing. There is no sun, but we still need that electricity. So the availability of that energy when we need it is challenged by the patterns of the resources that we establish. So the BEST consortium is trying to make sure countries are able to increase how much storage of that variable electricity can be incorporated in the development of the energy supplies industry, so that then it can be available when you need it. That's one way.
Okay.
Another way would be for us to
jump in,
increase.
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, Zeph. If I may jump in just a little bit. I mean, if we're talking about storage, And
Yes.
pardon me, I'm speaking like a layman here, but when we think about storage, we think about batteries, right? And if I'm not wrong, batteries, we're talking about, say...
Sorry?
Can you hear me, Zeph? Zeph,
Hello?
can you hear me properly? Zeph?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was losing a bit.
If we're talking about battery storage, we're talking about batteries. I mean, that's what I think the common layman knows about storage of power, of energy. But if we're talking about batteries, we're talking about things like lithium ion. We're talking about things that actually cause a massive environmental impact in the extraction of, say, lithium, in the various places, cadmium and all these other things that make batteries, which actually leads to yet another criticism of renewable energy, that the environmental impact that comes from getting there. What do you say about that?
Yes, so storage can be in those two ways. There is the technology, which is the batteries that you're mentioning. That's improving quite a bit. Because we are used to having the kind of lead, for example, lead ion batteries, which would just be 5-6 years and it's gone. Technologies are improving now. And yes, there's been quite a bit of challenges around the extraction of the materials that are required for us to establish this kind of battery energy systems. So that the only thing we can do would be to make sure that the kind of environmental and social safeguards that we are putting in place in that value chain are taken care of. One of the important things is for us to avoid this business of mine it in Africa, send it to some other country, and then import the battery over here. That already increases how much material intensity is needed for that battery to be produced. And that's one technology. There's also pumped storage, for example, where you can have, let's say, take the electricity coming from the Lake Turkana wind farm, pump water from downstream of the dam in Takwel, for example, return it to the dam and hold it there until you need it. So storage can be in the form of technology where it's actual electricity or energy stored in a battery, or you can store it in a dam. And that's just one way. It's not necessarily the only way that we recommend. The other way that we would recommend for storing or consuming this energy or keeping it would be to store it, to generate the kind of demand that you need. So for example, you can have tariffs that say it will be cheaper for you to use electricity, let's say from midnight to 5 a.m. Because during that time you have quite a bit of wind. Some of those would be incentives that allow for consumers to increase the consumption of renewable energy, and the overall mix will then end up being a lot more greener, which is why I was going towards the idea of saying, if you're going to increase renewable energy, then you have to make sure that it's getting consumed. Otherwise, when the consumers demand that electricity, the utility is going to avail it. And when there is no renewable energy available, they're going to switch on some of the power plants like Kivugi down in Mombasa or Thika power plant, which are using fossil fuels, and that will be a lot more expensive in the long run. So you have a lot of renewable energy, but the net effect of that becomes increased cost of the same. I'll give you an example on a way to drive demand. Electric mobility. We have a railway system that is growing and expanding. We don't have to be using these fossil fuels that we use, burning the kind of oil it uses, while we have geothermal, for example. Why then don't we turn that into electric? We can also use that for electric cars, which is another issue. I know there's all this battery issue connected to it. But it is more like saying, let's find ways to absorb this electricity while it is getting generated. We can shift schools, for example, to cooking with electricity, as long as that cost makes sense. But then you will need regulations, you will need policies that allow for this kind of a transition to happen on a greener technology. So there's ways to make sure we are consuming this renewable energy when it is generated, to avoid the storage so that it comes straight from the power plant into the consumption. And that makes sure that the talk that renewable energy is cheap is actually made into a reality versus what we are seeing today, where you're increasing renewable energy generation and you don't necessarily sell all of it, which means then you have to step in and put other sort of fuels to arrange the power.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does indeed. And I mean, just listening to you, it does appear to me, and to many people I'm sure, that it requires quite a bit of a balancing act. I mean, there's so many factors that need to be just so. I mean, you need to have all the ducks in a row before you fire. And which leads me to a question. What really are the obstacles that you've seen that are stopping us as a country, as a continent, from moving towards renewable energy as the mainstream way of doing things? What's stopping us from doing that?
Right. So the first outright thing is that these technologies are newer. They are, many of them are nascent. Many of them have not been tested at scale. Of course, quite a number of them are sort of mature now, but the cost of renewables is not necessarily as low as, for example, let's say hydro. Hydro is an old technology, has been around for a while. So that's the first one. The fact that they are new means that there's already a lot of perceptions around what that could be. And then it is prohibitively expensive to start with. And that's a barrier that can be removed by a number of factors, including people creating consortia and partnerships that, bring the right kind of financing to the table. So that's one of them. The other one is the kind of energy systems that we are already used to. So we were used to set up a power plant that you just need to put the coal, switch it on, and the power is available. Put in the oil, switch it on, and the power is available. And we have assets that have cost millions of dollars to install. If you have a power plant like that one in Kivugi, you need up to 25 years for you to, if you're setting it up for profit, as was the case, then you don't just shut it down. That would be a very good option. If you can shut it down, then we will be forced to look into renewables only. But you don't just shut it down. It's somebody's business. Somebody needs to be paid. This is why it appears in your bill every month, every week, every day, because somebody installed that power plant expecting to be paid when they sell or they generate the power, or even when they avail the power plant, which then means that you don't just shut it down. If you shut it down, somebody needs to pay. Somebody paying means that it will be loaded onto the consumer.
Right.
So because the system has been that way, more like we are addicted to that kind of older system, it's not as easy for us to transition. But then in Africa, then we are just many countries, because we are talking about 600-700 million people that don't have access to any form of electricity out of 1.4 billion. Just means every second African does not have access to electricity in any form.
That's right.
Which then means a lot of countries are at a crossroads now. They have a chance to say, instead of following the old system, let's go to the newer system. And then address the barriers we just talked about, cost, how new it is, intermittency, which we talked about earlier. So some of those barriers are mental, some of them are systemic, some of them are beyond just the African country in question. If we were to isolate a country, it's kind of tied to an international energy system, or energy supply system, which is why we have to really think about some of these things from a regional perspective to the extent possible, if not global.
All right. Now, Zeph, as we wind up, I want to ask you two questions. Now, one is actually from your own experience. I understand you've actually been able to implement some of what we're talking about here practically. There's been a project you implemented, I believe, in Mali, a rural electrification project. I need you to tell us just as quickly as you can, just some somebody would say, high-level figures about it, just high-level details, just bullet points about it, and talk to us a little bit also about the projects you did in the Imbo and Moso basins in Burundi, which are actually quite fantastic. Talk to us about that. Sell it to us, just a proof of concept, so to speak.
Right.
Hit us with that, quick as you can.
Yes,
please.
let me give you the one later one. The Mali one was a few years back, sometime in 2017, 18 or thereabout. We have one that is a lot more later, which is similar to the Mali one, which is distributed renewable energy in agriculture modalities. This is an initiative that is led by African Development Bank, Geapp, which is where I am working currently, and a few other partners. And what it is doing is to establish small power grids, which is what we call mini grids, using solar to drive irrigation systems or agriculture-based systems, which later will include sun. So what this is doing is where the grid has not arrived and there's a community there that has economic activities, you can avail electricity and try to do this to the extent possible in a commercial sense to say it makes business sense for you to install this mini grid. And this mini grid is going to be powering activities for consumers who are willing to pay for the power, because then they are going to be making money out of that. So that's one of those projects. The Imbo and Moso project in Burundi was an IFAD project that was also funded by the GCF, and my role was to bring in climate finance, which is another way of us increasing capital coming into electrification or using renewable energy. And this was a project that is trying to increase the resilience of production systems, agricultural production systems, which is to say, protect the protect the soils, So yeah, this was more of a climate resilience project that makes sure you're using energy, you're using water in an efficient way. And this is really a strong demonstration of how we can draw in different types of capital, especially carbon finance climate finance in this sense, to avail the kind of capital that we keep saying is missing, but also to reduce the cost of these technologies, which we already have mentioned that are not necessarily the cheapest just yet, because they are kind of new in many ways.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And final question to you, Zeph. What can you and I do? You're an expert, but what can the people at home do? What can we do as a common wananchi, as regular old folk? What can we do to advance the gospel of renewable energy? Quick as you can.
So I would say a number of things. Number one is for us to be open to the discussions. It's not necessarily supposed to be like a religion where you have to believe it is good or not. We need to have a proper discourse as to, is this the right option? We need to understand what kind of technologies we are adopting and why. Why do we want to do best? It is not just because somebody is saying, let's do it, or it's a good idea, but because it should make sense to the country, and we should be looking 10, 20, 30 years into the future rather than every day. And then for us, for consumer, you and I, being able to consider which aspect of resources, especially the energy resources, which aspect are you able to control? So, the same way you can have your windows open and you're switching on your AC, that power that you're using, even if you can afford it, is coming from somewhere. And that somewhere is contributing to the bigger effect, which is what, for example, causes climate change. And that's a major threat to our sustainability. So it means us just being conscious that you don't have to use less resources just because you cannot afford, or it's a cost barrier for you, but because you're affecting a bigger system. And that bigger system is the responsibility of all of us, because we are sharing the planet. So it's more like day-to-day things. Don't freeze things if you're planning to use them tomorrow. Keep them in the fridge, or don't necessarily have to keep them, because any energy that you use eventually has come from somewhere. And that somewhere has cost us something, and it might have caused pollution, and it has an impact on the bigger planetary system.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Zeph, for your insight, and we look forward to future conversations on the same. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been... Thank you so much, Zeph, and enjoy Watamu, please, on our behalf, as we pay taxes here. Right. That has been Zeph Kivugi, the Regional Partnership Manager for Africa for the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. That was Zeph. This is Victor Muyakane, and it's been my absolute pleasure to bring you this discussion as well as the news. I wish you a good night full of God's blessings. And thank you to all that made this program a reality. Good night.